got to manage myself, I've got to manage my mind. The task is not easy, but to higher heights I climb.
I'm determined to succeed, so no excuses, please. If you don't want success in life, then don't hinder me. Yes, let the whole world know I'm a CEO. You are a CEO. I'm a CEO. You are a CEO. I'm a CEO. The time is here to celebrate. You are a CEO. You are a CEO. You are a CEO. You are a CEO. Yes, let the whole world know. The time is here to celebrate. Yes, it's calling, so don't be late. You are a CEO.
Hello everyone, Michael E. Parker, and this is another night in our series where we've been talking about fear, and our past shows have been so great. I've been enjoying those, partnering together with Mr. Terry Fulton, our Chief Content Officer, and tonight we're going to go one step deeper and talk about overcoming our 7 fears. And so there are 7 fears we talk about at URCO, and tonight, June 17th, we're going to go into what these are. And the more you understand each of these fears, you can listen to those voices differently and respond to them differently. So tonight we're going to have a fighting theme. We're going to use a little bit of Rocky because we have to fight our fears. We have to fight our thoughts. We have to fight our emotions. So as we go through the journey, I'm going to be talking to you, and then I have a surprise for you a little later. We're going to hear from Terry Fulton. He's going to come and talk a little bit and put a little bow tie on the show here tonight. So without further ado, let's jump in, because I want you to remember, as Rocky had to find out, that there is no tomorrow. We have to start now facing our fears.
Inside, baby. Side to side. Move your head. Watch him now. Watch him. Right. Remember, he's got 2 hands, right? Come on, Rock. It's not a game. You want to live in the hospital for 5 weeks this time? You thought I was tough? This jump will kill you. All right. Come on, come on. Get your head on your shoulders, man. Think about the fight. Think about the fight. Clubber Lang's in here. He's trying to hurt you, Rock. He's trying to hurt you. Okay, here he comes. Jab. He's jabbing. He's jabbing. He's trying to hurt you. You gotta fight him. You gotta move. Up against the meeting. He's up against the rope. Here's the corner. He's hooking. He's hooking. He's hooking. What's the matter with you?
Tomorrow. Let's do it tomorrow.
There is no tomorrow. There is no tomorrow. There is no tomorrow.
Every time I watch that clip, it still moves me to think about how the time is always now to face our fears. And I want you to take this show very serious tonight, because these are things we deal with in our life every day, all the time, and they actually hinder us from succeeding in our jobs, succeeding in our relationships, succeeding in our even our endeavors that we try to achieve. It's just trying to succeed and being happy every day. These things always get in the way. I want you to listen closely at each of these, and I want you to know that this is not a night to put it on the shelf and say, I'll do it later, but to think about how these things actually can interrupt your life and what you can do about it. Let's talk about the first one. The first one I want to talk to you about is the fear of embarrassment or humiliation. This is something that we have an emotion that will overwhelm us at times, where we forethink about why we will be embarrassed or humiliated when we feel something is going to go wrong. This is something that will, come within our thoughts no matter what you're thinking about doing. You could be thinking about something you have to do, something you have to actually accomplish. and the first thought you get is that, what if I'm humiliated? What if everyone laughs at me? What if I'm embarrassed? And so this is something we have to be aware of. This is one of the ways that fear likes to show up, and we have to start telling ourselves that we have to get more courage within ourselves, that when we perform, when we take an action, that we prevent ourselves from going into a deep sense of embarrassment and humiliation. Now, the reason I call out deep sense of embarrassment and humiliation, because sometimes we will be embarrassed by something. Sometimes we will be humiliated. But how deep do you allow that fear to overwhelm you to the point of paralysis? So this is very important, making sure that we don't allow this fear of being embarrassed or humiliated to actually paralyze us. So think about when you feel embarrassment, when you feel some humiliation, that you have to begin to think about what did go well. And if you can't find something that went well, sometimes you have to just throw things away. You know, it happened, I'm going to throw it away. How do you throw it away? You can't throw it away from reality. You can't throw it away from truth, but you can throw it away from dwelling on it every day and chewing and eating on it all the time to the point that it begins to mess up how you feel. So this is very important. So let's go to another one. That's a critical one there about embarrassment or humiliation. Now, another key one that we always have to be aware of is the fear of rejection. You can see on this picture, that man back there, he's in a serious state of rejection here. I don't know what took place. It looked like a relationship went bad. But you can have rejection in so many different ways. You can feel rejected because your proposal wasn't received. You can feel rejected because someone didn't give you what you wanted. You can feel rejected because you didn't hear what you wanted to hear. All of these are fears that we have. And so a lot of times, we won't even take an action where rejection is possible. This is the danger of the fear of rejection. It's not the rejection. It's the fear of it that paralyzes us, because it causes us not to even take an action. And what happens when we do get a sense of rejection, it reinforces those fears and says, this is why I need to shut down. This is why I need to stop trying. This is why I need to stop opening up. This is why I shouldn't put myself out there. And that is the danger, because the fear of rejection will stop you from taking an action, but then when you are rejected, it will heighten that emotion of not taking an action for fear that you might be rejected again. So we want to be very careful with that. That's another critical one. And again, making sure that we're able to fight that emotion, putting your hands up in your mind, that you're able to punch back, that when you feel you might be rejected, you have to learn how to be okay with the fact that something might not go your way. How long do you dwell in those thoughts of it didn't go my way? That is where the danger begins to set in. Make sure you don't do that. All right, let's go to a third area, and this is another fear. So this is the fear of consequences. So here's a lot of times where I have to do something that I feel is the right thing to do, but I'm afraid of the consequence of that decision. What will be the consequence of doing this? I might lose a friend. I might not be as popular. I might have to actually do without something. I might lose money, right? There's so many things that we don't want to lose. And so the fear of the consequence is also something we have to be aware of, and not to allow that emotion to get in front of our values. So if we have certain values, if we have certain principles, there's a point where those values and principles have to allow you to rise above the fear of the consequence. I can tell you, with even doing things with my health and having to make some changes, you know, the consequence sometimes of giving something up that you like, it's an adjustment. But you also have to think about, you have to switch your thinking and think about the consequence of not doing what you know is right. That is something that has to overwhelm the fear of the consequences you don't want to feel and that you don't want to receive. So again, there's always going to be a consequence, but it's how our mind looks at it. Our mind will only look at the negative consequence of what we feel we have to give up or lose. It will not look at the consequence of what if we don't be who we want to be? Or what if we don't grow where we need to grow? What if we don't do the things that make us better? It doesn't look at that. That is why, sometimes when you want to work out, the consequence of working out is being sore. But if you focus on being sore and not building more muscle and not being more healthy and not being more agile and not feeling more free, if you don't focus on those consequences and only dwell on the consequence of the short-term pain, then you'll miss the opportunity to do something great. This is, again, what we're talking about, the fear of consequences. One more I want to go over before we take another ride with Rocky here. We also have to deal with the fear of what people think. Okay? The fear of what people think. This is a big one. We see this a lot with our young people, with our youth, but not just them. It impacts us all as adults and every stage of life. We are worried about what people think. We're worried about how they think about what we have or don't have. We're worried about how people think about how we look. We're worried about how people think about, how good we are at something. And so this is to be overwhelmed by what others have in their mind. And I can't tell you how dangerous it is to live your life through the minds of other people. So think about that. You're living your life through the minds of other people. So everything you do is not based on anything to do with you, which has a lot to do with self-love, self-worth, self-value. I've lost my self-value when I'm overwhelmed by the fear of what other people think. And so sometimes when we come through things and when we have challenges or when we have shortcomings or we have, different things, I won't say, we talk about disabilities, but really, it could be that you have an ability to do something differently is how I like to describe it. But when you think about those different things that we might consider a shortcoming, if you're not careful, you allow that to take over your thoughts, and you're so concerned about how people view those things that it totally overwhelms your thinking about yourself and the actions that you begin to take. So the fear of what people think, this is a big one. And again, we are surgically detailing how these fears work, so you can notice them when they're talking to you. Notice them when they're whispering at you. Notice them when they're trying to put you in bondage. You have to hear that voice. And tonight, we're learning how to think that way. I want to go to another clip here where Rocky finally came to the realization that he was afraid. And again, before we can remove a fear, we have to first see it and understand it and accept it and admit it. And this is what we're doing in this fight of overcoming our fear.
I don't believe in myself no more, don't you understand? What if I don't believe? That's it. He's finished. It's over. That's it.
That's not it!
That is it!
Why don't you tell me the truth?
What are you putting me through, Adrian? You want to know the truth? The truth is I don't want to lose what I got. In the beginning, I didn't care about what happened to me. I go in the ring, I get busted up. I didn't care. But now there's you, there's the kid. I don't want to lose what I got.
What do we have that can't be replaced? What? A house. We got cars. We got money. We got everything but the truth.
I'm afraid, all right? You want to hear me say it? You want to break me down? All right, I'm afraid. For the first time in my life, I'm afraid.
I'm afraid, too. There's nothing wrong with being afraid.
There is. For me, there is.
Why, you're human, aren't you?
Look, I don't know what I am. All I know is I'm a liar. And because of that, Mickey ain't here no more.
You didn't push him into anything. He was a grown man, and he did what he had to do. And you have no right to feel guilty for what happened. You don't. You were a champion, and you did what you were expected to do. And you did what I and everybody else thought you should do. And you want to tell me that those fights weren't real, that you were carried? Well, I don't believe it. It doesn't matter what I believe, because you're the one that's got to carry that fear around inside you. Afraid that everybody's going to take things away. Afraid you're going to be remembered as a coward. That you're not a man anymore. Well, none of it's true. But it doesn't matter if I tell you. It doesn't matter, because you're the one that's got to settle it. Get rid of it. Because when all the smoke is cleared and everyone's through chanting your name, it's just going to be us. And you can't live like this. We can't live like this. Because it's going to bother you for the rest of your life. Look what it's doing to you now. Paula thinks you can do it. So do I. But you gotta want to do it for the right reasons. Not for the guilt over Mickey. Not for the people. Not for the title. Not for money or me. But for you. Just you. Just you alone.
And if I lose?
And you lose. But at least you lose with no excuses.
no fear. And I know you can live with that.
How'd you get so tough?
I live with a fighter.
I really love you. I love you.
So as you can see, we're going back to the 80s here, and we're pulling some principles out of an old film like Rocky. But listen, I want you to know how much we can learn from some of those things that we were listening to, and we all need our Adrian in our mind. Someone that is telling us that we have to see things as they are, but we have to have the courage to rise above our fear. And so I want you, as we go through these last set of fears, I want you to get in that mindset, get your inner Adrian going, where you start to think about that I have to see things for what they are, but I can only live with myself the moment that I start to deal with my fear, face my fear, and give it my best. As you saw in the clip, again, not promising the outcome, not guaranteeing the win, but to be able to live with yourself that you did absolutely everything you could to be great. Now, let's go to our next fear here. So the next fear we want to go over here is the fear of doing something different. And this is a big one because we, again, get comfortable when we're doing things that are normal, things that everyone understands, things that people expect you to do. We talk a lot about excellence in URCO, and we define excellence as the ability to do more than what is expected. So that is different within itself. So to be excellent, you also have to overcome some fear. A lot of times you see people who are afraid to even accomplish things. They're afraid to push themselves. They're afraid to be different than they were last year, to be different than they were last week. They're afraid to be different in terms of the way that they carry themselves because everyone is used to them being a certain way. They want to stay in the box that people have put them in because it's easier to do that. And to grow, you have to force yourself to be made uncomfortable at times. So if you're not willing to be different, if you're not willing to try something new, even as an entrepreneur, even as a professional in your career, if you're not willing to do something different, you will always be the same. And we know that. We know the definition of insanity, doing the same thing, expecting a different outcome. But think about that as it relates to your success. Think about that as it relates to your thinking. This is very important. Now, another fear that we want to talk about is the fear of missing something better. This is that fear of the grass might be greener on the other side. And we all get overwhelmed by this feeling. Feeling that if I make this decision, if I turn right, what would have happened if I turned left, right? If I, go here, what would have happened if I went there? So these are the things that we have to start to deal with because these thoughts, and this is, again, you talk about paralysis. This is one of those that will put you in a state of paralysis where you end up not doing anything. We see people do this. We see people do this in their, journey towards success. We see people do this a lot in relationships, right? Don't want to commit to a relationship, always worried about something that might be better, something they might lose. And this could be not just a relationship, between someone dating or something. It could be a relationship with a job, relationship with family. It could be a relationship in your career. Always afraid of what might happen because I did this or that. And so it allows you to always put yourself in a situation where you can't really have peace. You can't really focus. You can't really make a decision and feel good about it because you're always overwhelmed by that emotion. So if I always think about it, if I do something, literally, if I eat a steak and thinking about, but would it have been better to eat some chicken, right? And I can't even be happy with my meal because I'm even at the restaurant, I can't order my food because I'm worried about what I could miss out on. At some point, we have to make a decision, and we have to be willing to live with that decision. And we also have to realize that there'll be another time to make a decision. There'll be another day. You can fight another battle. You don't have to put all of that stress on that one decision, that one moment. This is, again, what we have to be careful about. So keep that in mind. Very, very critical. And make sure that you always push yourself to be willing to do what you feel is best based on the information you have and live with that decision without being overwhelmed by fear. All right, let's go to last but not least. This is a big one. We talk about the fear of failure. The fear of failure. Now, when we think about the fear of failure, I don't know about you, but just the term failure brings a certain feeling. You see the guy in the picture with the head down and out at the water, it's dark, it's a certain mood to that picture, that image. And a lot of times we think about failure, that's what we think about. And, I'm reminded of a statement Dr. King said one time, only when it's dark enough can you see the stars. And we have to be willing to see the treasure in failure. We have to see failure as a womb for success. How can I learn from the things that I deem a failure? In fact, if I learn how to reposition failure as a foundation for success, it's just a step in the process. It's not an end result. So we have to be careful how we begin to define failure. And when we, again, remember, all of these fears we're talking about, it's the fear of, meaning it hasn't happened yet, right? It's the fear that it will happen. So we have to be careful of what we defined as a failure, and then we have to be careful of not getting overwhelmed at the emotion of what could happen versus what really is going to happen. So if I have to give a speech, right, and I could say there's failure to me would mean that no one stood up and gave me a standing ovation. Right? And if that's my bar of failure, then, I'm setting myself up, right, to feel pretty bad about myself, right? Because that doesn't happen every day. But if failure to me is to not do my best and to not get through the material and to not make adjustments while I'm presenting and to give it my all, if that is failure, then I'm setting myself up to succeed by the very definition of what failure is first. Now, when I actually do that speech, if I have some challenges or things that come up, how I respond to those challenges still is dealing with how I deal with failure. So we have to keep all of that in mind with this particular fear, with this particular emotion. So we have made it through these 7 fears, and these 7 fears are some of the ones that I know that none of you can escape. I really wanted to go through this with you, walk through this in a really sober fashion. This is a very serious topic, and I hope you really listen to each of these for the purpose of understanding how they work, understanding where they come from, understanding the thought process that comes with them, so when you notice them, you can start to do something about it. Now, when we come back, I'm gonna invite Mr. Terry Fulton back, who's been helping us with our fear series here, and he's gonna talk to you about some things you can do to start working on overcoming those fears, even some activities you can do when you're by yourself. All right, so keep that in mind. Make sure you don't miss that segment. It's coming up next. But before we get there, let's get back to Rocky, and we have to understand, once we are armed and we know what those fears are, once we accept what we're afraid of and have the courage to do something about it, we can get stronger. And this is what the song and the images you are seeing now, it's a time to get stronger, and it's a time to fly above our fears. We'll be right back. enjoyed that video, and I hope you enjoyed the story that's been being told through these Rocky video clips that Michael Lee Parker has been taking us on. And I hope you really were able to tune in to everything that has been happening up to this point, because it's been extremely important to be able to identify some of these things that Michael Lee Parker was talking about. So if we can just look one more time on the screen again, I want to list these out for you in summary. He talked to us about the fear of embarrassment or humiliation. He talked about rejection. Talked about consequences and what people think. He talked about the fear of doing something different, missing something better, and the fear of failure. These are the 7 fears that have been identified this evening that all of us need to become more aware of and know how they actually interact in our lives. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about a little bit now. Let's get a little more specific about what this means to us individually. So when you start to think about the question of how do I overcome these fears now? It's nice that I see them or I understand them, but how do I actually identify them and I begin to overcome them? And it all starts with understanding that fear is an emotion, and you can develop emotional intelligence about each individual thing that you are experiencing. Tonight we are talking about fear. So here are some things that we would like for you all to do. First, relax. Pump the brakes. Understand that fear, it's mental. And so you can actually control all of the thoughts that are coming into your mind. Begin to slow your mind down. Don't respond to everything in a rash way or quickly. Don't allow yourself to get overwhelmed when you begin to experience any one of these fears or a combination of them. You got to understand that they're mental. And you can begin to go through some mental exercises to kind of slow your mind down. Begin to tell yourself that it's only fear. I got to understand what's happening here. Let me go ahead and not do anything rash. And you begin to talk to yourself like that. And sometimes you got to talk to yourself out loud, and that is fine. Okay, so that's how you begin to relax a little bit. The next thing that we want you to do is begin to list these fears out and then look at some specific examples in each one of these areas that you might experience. And so what you want to do is you want to connect the fear to a specific experience. And then you want to connect that experience to a specific way that it makes you feel. Okay, and so I'll give you some examples because sometimes conceptually that could be pretty difficult to do. So let's talk about embarrassment or humiliation. You may say that this actually makes me feel like I'm not smart, right? That's a specific, maybe I have to do some public speaking and I feel like I'm going to be embarrassed or humiliated. I feel like I'm not smart enough or I can articulate my thoughts. I've actually had people talk to me about that. Now you're getting very specific in terms of how that fear makes you feel. Or maybe you got rejection here, and so maybe that makes you feel like something's wrong with you. Like, why do people reject me? Something's wrong with me. That's a specific feeling that may overwhelm you, and then I lose my confidence because I feel like something's wrong with me. Well, that's not always the case. Sometimes people may not be interested. Sometimes there might be something wrong with the other person. Sometimes the timing's not right. It's not the right venue or environment. There's a lot of reasons why rejection may happen, but you have to begin to understand how it makes you feel specifically, okay? Then it might be consequences. I feel like everything is hard. Everything has a consequence. Every decision I make, there's something that is going to make it more difficult. And you almost kind of get a little whiny smurf in you because, you begin to fear that, there might be a little pressure, there might be a little pain that goes with it, but you can't worry about that. You have to focus on doing the right thing for yourself in your life. And so you got to be able to deal with that. Let's go to what people think. This one's a common one where people say, I don't want to let anyone down. You might be experiencing peer pressure at work or different things. Everybody wants you to go a certain place, but you don't feel comfortable. Well, I don't
don't want people to tease me behind my back, or I want them to think that I'm this way, or I'm better than them. Or you gotta pump the brakes a little bit, and you gotta live after your own convictions sometimes and be okay with that. It doesn't matter what other people think. So you gotta be able to start to see, is that the specific? These are just examples, right? So it might be different for you. I'm just taking you through an exercise to where you can begin to do this at home. Do something different. Makes me always feel like I'm lonely, or I'm out on an island. You know, here comes Terry again, or he always doing something different, or he's always got a different idea. Well, you can't let that hinder you from trying to achieve your goals. And so you got to make sure that you understand that. That's an example there. Missing something better makes me always feel like I'm lacking fulfillment or satisfaction, right? Am I okay with who I am or where I'm trying to go? Or do I always feel like if I'm missing out on something different, that I lack a certain level of satisfaction in my life? What am I looking for in the first place? I got to get a little more specific if I'm going to be able to overcome this fear. Then lastly, failure makes me feel like I'm not good enough. Makes me feel like I'm lacking in areas where I can't achieve things. Therefore, I'm satisfied with just getting by. It's easier to keep my expectations low. So these are just some things that you can think about in terms of the specific. Remember, tie that fear to an experience, and then you got to tie that experience into how it makes you feel, and you're on the road to emotional intelligence when you can do this. The next thing that you want to be able to do is you want to be able to set an achievable goal and start facing each fear. And so this is really important because now you're going through the levels of actually achieving emotional intelligence. So maybe the first level or the first goal is just being aware of it when it happens. And then you can begin to start to get beyond that. Not only are you aware, you can start to manage how you're feeling in the moment as you're experiencing fear. So that's another measurement that you can have. Not only that, you can manage emotionally influenced behavior, right? And so when somebody is trying to influence fear into your mind, you can begin to grow and manage that. That's another measurement that you can have. And lastly, you can become so emotionally intelligent where your fear is concerned, you can actually manage the fears of other people. Sometimes people place their fears on you. They project their fears onto you, and you can manage that as well. So these are some very critical measurements that you can set for yourself and goals. But even if you're at the level of awareness, that is a major milestone in your life. And so don't feel like you have to matriculate through all of this in one setting, but make sure that you think about those specific fears, those specific feelings that are brought to the surface, and now you can identify them and learn to manage them. And lastly, once you begin to set those goals for yourself, start to actually look at how are you doing. Take some measurements. Set a specific date. Set a time limit. Maybe for the next 3 months, I'm going to go through this exercise, and I'm going to log and journal, and I'm going to actually begin to see how I'm doing. Am I aware when it's happening? Am I doing okay? Can I manage myself better when it's happening? And these are different things that you could do to actually begin to overcome fear one step at a time. So I hope you enjoyed this segment, giving a brief little summary on some things that you can do to overcome fear and face them. We're going to ask Mr. Michael Lee Parker to come back here and take us home. But before we do, we have one more video we want to show you outside of the 7 fears that's a little bit different of a slant, because sometimes we don't know what our deepest fears really are. So we'll be right back.
Sir, they can cut the chain off the door, but they can't make us play.
We've decided we're gonna finish what you started, sir.
Yeah, so leave us be, coach. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We were all meant to shine as children do. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Sir, I just want to say thank you. You saved my life.
Thank you, sirs. All of you.
I hope you enjoyed that very, very powerful video from Coach Carter. That's actually a story about a true coach that was in Richmond, California, where I went through a lot of my toughest times as a young man. And so watching that video, it reminds you of what our deepest fear really is. And a lot of times we're afraid of how great we can be. I've been there before in my life. I'm sure some of you have. And if you just discovered tonight that you're in that place, we want to welcome you to a new frontier of courage, a new frontier of being better and greater. The things that we heard tonight from Terry Fulton were just outstanding. If you could really take that to heart, thinking about what are you going to do about it, right? You learned a lot. You know what the 7 fears are, but it's those who do something about it that really make a decision to be a better person and to achieve greater courage in their life, because fear is not going away, but how we deal with it can start today. And so let's keep that in mind. And listen, if you're new to our show, we want to remind you, if you like the information you heard, this is just touching the surface to what you'll get by becoming a part of our membership, making sure you register, stay a part of our community. We believe in living this way. And so as you can see on the screen, urco.com is where you can register. If you've not already registered, to make sure you join us. Some of you are in our private Facebook group or you subscribe to us on YouTube. But if you're watching this video, make sure you actually go to urco.com and fill out the short login there, register, become a full member, and then go download our apps from the App Store. But you have to first register. Another thing I want you to keep in mind is that we always talk about live, learn, and earn. We're living a life, an uplifted life, a life where our mind is fit and not just our body. And so this is, again, what we want to encourage you to do. You find out more about our app, Uplift. If you're a member, you can get access to that. And then about learning. You learned more tonight about fear. We're always talking about ways that we can overcome those 4 enemies of self-ignorance, fear, getting rid of mediocrity, and our insecurities. We're always trying to overcome those in different ways. And then you can earn. If you learn more about URCO, you can join our affiliate program, and that is free of charge to join. And you can start earning just from spreading the word and getting more people to come into this wonderful, wonderful community. So having said that, we're going to be talking about a great topic in our next show on June 24th. We're going to have a leadership series, and so I'm so excited about this because URCO is all about leadership, but self-leadership. We're going to talk about leadership on different levels. That first segment that you see there is going to be about preparing yourself to lead. So on June 24th at 6:30, we want you to join us, and we're going to start that series. And again, if you want to be a better leader, again, there's entrepreneurs, there's intrapreneurs that are inside of companies, and then there are selfpreneurs, which we all need to be. So no one can escape leadership. So make sure and join us. Until then, get out there and let the whole world know that you are a CEO. Overcome your 7 fears by remembering that you run the business of you. Thank you for joining us tonight. Have a great evening.
CEO.